Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma. I'm Nick.
I'm Kisma.
Hello. And today we are talking about There's Always Enough. Working with the Law, Part 2.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set. How's it going, Kisma?
Hello. Everything is awesome. There's always enough. Never have to worry.
You're geeking out.
This is the best stuff ever.
You're so in your zone.
I know. I love this.
I know you do.
I love talking about the universal laws. I love talking about intuition, spirituality, energy, just like...
Why do you love it so much?
Because I think the world wants us to not believe, and we got to get over that.
Tell us about little child Kisma. Like, were you like a little Kismatron, like as a little girl, just like running around thinking cosmic thoughts?
Well, yes. I'd go play in the forest, and then I would like do weird stuff with my hands. Like, it's very similar to what I do now when I heal. I would just sort of like, I was getting rid of bad things is what I would tell my mom. She probably thought I was compulsive. She's like, what do you do? I was like, I'm just getting rid of bad things. And she's like, okay. And then I remember when I was like 13, I tried reading these really thick philosophers like Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. And then, I was just like supposed to read this. And then my mom would bring home tarot cards, which I never really figured out, but I knew that they were kind of fun. And I was I remember I put this on Facebook and people were like, don't do the Ouija board. I loved that thing.
Oh, that's right.
It was a happy Ouija board in my house.
Yeah.
We used to levitate people at Girl Scout camp, the 8-ball. It was just, I don't know. I was just like, there's something that no one's telling me. That was like the theme. People aren't telling me things and I better find out what it is.
You gotta know. That's a really common theme, actually. I hear that a lot. I know I certainly felt, similarly in my own quirky little ways. But there's something.
Yeah.
I hear it so often from people. It's like, I want to know.
Right.
I want to know there's something more.
Want to know the pieces of the puzzle. Like, how does this universe really work?
Yeah. And I think that can be hard to really connect with that for people who are really in that grind, in that constant, like, there's all this stuff going on and all these little things that are drawing their attention, and to really find your groove in all of that, to have that higher connection for yourself and intuitive flow about your life, a little more ease, not to say that everything's going to be easy, but a little more ease in allowing things to occur in your life rather than having to force everything to happen. Well, those things become really important questions about, like, well, there must be something more to it. There must be something.
And there is,
right? Yeah. And maybe you were a little Kisma in your life too, to the listener. Like, maybe you were a little Kisma too, like having all these thoughts and fun, doing all these quirky little things. Come to find out, you weren't crazy.
I know, right? I mean, I'll listen to anybody. I had a client say, oh yeah, I've seen fairies in my garden. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, awesome.
That's awesome.
I think the purpose though is, from your original question, why do I geek out so much? Because we've been controlled as a society, as an education, as just trying. And I don't always go, it's from a bad intention. I think people seek safety. And the things they know create a familiarity and a safety, and they stick with that. So oftentimes parents with the best of intention, they're going to be like, don't think about that stuff. Just go play football. It's like, it's tangible. It's there, right? Or just whatever. In schools, who's going to teach the art of energy in schools?
Well, I've been thinking about this a little bit. And in a company, like, if you have a product, your company needs to produce a consistent product.
Right.
Like, you can't be going to McDonald's and getting a different hamburger every time you go there. Like, you go to McDonald's because you want a McDonald's hamburger. And I don't know why you'd want that, but if you want that, that's, you need to get that. Okay, so now that same thing gets applied to education. And,
Right.
And human, so they want a predictable result. Well, human beings are inherently unpredictable
Right.
because they're human beings.
Right.
They
Right.
have their free will. Every human being is unique
Right.
in their own way, and they have their own special gifts and their own really, really cool things. And when we're looking for a consistent result, a standardized test to determine well, how smart are you and where should you be and all this, it's bound to fail.
Right.
But that's not the worst part. The failing is not the worst part. The worst part is clamping down that scope so narrow that the things outside of that people lose connection with it.
Exactly.
And that's the worst part, because that's the vast amount of your potential is outside of the scope of what is being taught through our mainstream.
Yep. And hence we have the law of supply.
Hence we have the law of supply, which will take you out of that.
Unlimited supply.
Ah, man, unlimited.
Unlimited supply.
Let's just, unlimited. Unlimited.
Unlimited.
Yeah.
Unlimited.
Well, hard for the mind to
Challenging for the mind.
Challenging for the mind to really grab onto.
Here's how I explain it to people. The universe is limitless. It really is. We're constructed, created from with that same energy. The sun always comes up. It doesn't say, of course, I know we're rotating people. I know that's happening, but the sun never says, oh, you guys have been bad. I'm not going to shine. The stars never stop twinkling, even though we keep messing things up on Mother Earth. The universe is always moving. It's always giving. It's always giving. There's an endless supply. We as humans are the ones that want to keep cutting the supply by doing weird stuff to the planet, to each other, etc. Yet the universe keeps giving. There's an unlimited supply. We simply have to be willing to acknowledge that and to understand that we're not operating from our own physical supply by ourselves.
Well, he kicks off this one.
Is this from the same book as last week?
This is
Working with the Law.
Working with the Law. And
we'll have a link in our show notes.
He kicks off the law of supply with ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you, from Matthew.
Read that again.
Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you.
And again, so all of these laws, you get one, you get them all. Because last week we talked about mind action. If you haven't listened to it, go back. But it's the same thing. Like when you think about asking, it's a whole different result.
Yeah.
Most people forget to even ask for help.
Ask for help or ask
for what they desire.
What they desire, yeah.
Or seek it out.
Oh, there's also kinds of funny things around that.
Yeah, the thoughts just go into, I don't have it, instead of going and seeking it.
Right. I don't have. And it reminds me also of the quote by Voltaire that says, judge a man not by the answers he gives, but by the questions he asks.
So good.
And that to me is like really tapping into the law of supply in a certain way, because you're going to get what you're seeking. You'll get there, and if you're asking better questions, deeper questions, more fulfilling questions, you'll find more fulfillment in your life. If you're asking shallow questions, if you're focused on the wrong things and asking all the wrong questions, well, you're going to get all the wrong things in your life.
Right.
So I think this is a really interesting conversation about the law of supply. Again, kind of a brain bender. You talk about infinite. Okay, well, infinite is not a really, really big number.
It isn't a number.
It's beyond that. Mm-hmm. So the level of thinking, the style of thinking has to be radically different than what we have been trained to do.
So expansive.
It's not about adding up a whole bunch of things and calling it infinite. It's really about stepping outside of limitation. Mm-hmm. And that's
because the supply isn't limited.
Whole different way to look at it, which is more true to the nature of the universe as you explained. So let's see here. We affirm repeatedly that God is our supply And if we would think a moment and trace our supply back to its source, we would agree that the statement is true. The difficulty with some is that they can more easily look to creature for the source of their substance than to the creator.
Okay, I have to insert something here. I think this is because I think it's more easy for us humans to look at a human, a thing, ourselves as the source of our supply, because we so very often point the finger when things don't go wrong externally.
Well, that's just so much easier, right? It's just so much easier, right? Like, I didn't get what I wanted. It's somebody else's fault.
Right.
Like, I couldn't possibly.
So we turn it upside down. We're looking at what people, things aren't doing for us or aren't giving us.
Yeah.
And so that's looking at a negative supply.
Well, and now let's come back to the fact that nothing is ever still. So you're never going to just stagnate in a certain area. It'll feel stagnant, but you're actually spinning your wheels. So if you're going into that decrease, now you're in the law of decrease. So the more that you do that, you're in the downward spiral, and everything that you have in your whole life will shrink.
Exactly.
It'll just shrink.
Yep.
And before you know it, it's no wonder I hear people describe when they're in that state, it feels like the world is closing in on me.
I'm stuck.
And you know what I say? You're right.
it is closing. Now let's change that.
Yeah. And you can change that.
Right.
And it's really just a matter of starting to recognize what laws are at play so that you can
and how to use them.
Yeah. I love the title of the book, Working with the Law.
Yeah.
And we talk about using these laws in order to create more flow in your life.
And let's just insert here, because I think this helps to understand or even conceive the law of supply. I find the law of supply one that's tricky in conception. The law is equal to God. It's equal to universe. It's equal to Brahman. It's equal to source, spirit, whatever your word is for this supreme essence that we know has created us. That's the law. That's what he's talking about in this book. That's what we're talking about when we're like, work with a lot, work with the universe, work with spirit, let it serve you.
Right.
Allow it to supply you. And when we're asking for something and it can come, also be willing to receive it in the way that is in your highest and best, which might look different. And that's another place where people can get caught up. Well, I asked for red shoes and I got blue. And he was such an idiot for buying me blue shoes. Man, let that go. That's not going to work with a law of supply.
Yeah, right at the beginning of it, he talks about this as well. The law of his being is perpetual increase, progress, and growth. So when one good is realized, another desire for a greater good will develop. And when a higher state is reached, another more glorious state will unfold his vision and urge him on and on. Hence, the advancing life is the true life. The life that God intended man to live, right? So that's our nature is continuing to expand and grow in our life. Now, through that process, I think this is a kind of an interesting part of it is we have the dynamic of expansion and contraction, expansion and contraction. So if it's a one for one thing, then that's what's going to feel really stuck. But when there's expansion and then there's a natural bit of contraction, while that layer, like that level of expansion really kind of solidifies, then you expand to the next level. And
exactly.
And it's
just like your awakening, your spiritual growth. You go to one level and you kind of like take a breath, or there's a little like integration, which can feel like that contraction. And then you go to, then you further expand and you further expand.
Well, yes. And I think one of the parts that people get really tripped up on is you can kind of conceive 5 steps ahead. And then it can be frustrating to take the one step because it's not the one step that you really wanted. Like it didn't get you all the way there, right away. And so there's this process of incremental growth.
Yes.
And it's really, really important to start where you're at.
Yeah. If you don't know where you're at, then it's hard to go where you're going.
And be willing to be where you're at and take the next step. I think that's perfectly, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with not being satisfied.
Yeah, and we can look at that in a couple different ways, but I think just to reiterate, yes, take the next step. The next step is closer to the next step. And when, again, building that muscle of action, like we talked about in the law of mind action, building the muscle of understanding there's an unlimited law of supply. And then as you move forward, it's just like everything begins to flow easier.
Yes.
It really does.
Yeah. And it happens through that forward motion.
Totally.
You know, and it's like you described, or well, like Swami, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but like Swamiji will talk about, you don't get there all in one thing. It's not like a Jesus healing sort of situation to just suddenly become enlightened. You climb the ladder.
You climb the ladder mostly because think about the capacity. If you were going to change the oil in your car, you wouldn't take the clean oil and just pour it all over the dirty. It would not suffice. So we take out the dirty oil and we put in the clean. It's like desires. We're going to drop those lower desires and have higher desires towards a greater good.
Yeah.
We're going to get rid of congestion or blocks or beliefs, limiting beliefs, so that in our being, in our mind, in our field, we can put the higher frequency vibe.
Right. Right.
Very important.
Very important. And that's the climbing of the ladder. You actually can't grab onto the higher one until you let go of the lower one. And you can't get to the higher one if you're still holding on to the lower one.
Exactly.
So it has to be just like climbing a ladder. And that's really the way forward.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want to give a little, maybe this exercise will help our listeners because this is a big law. I mean, they're all big laws. And like I said, you get one, you get them all. One way to start to work with this is just like we talked about in the law of mind action, start it with one thing, apply it to one area. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like there's an area of your life that isn't working, like no matter what you do, you're going to really dive into that and begin to create some quiet time. You can do some journaling of just writing out all the negative thoughts, get it out so you can create some head space, some mind space. And then you're going to sit quietly, connect to your higher self, and ask some questions. Just ask for help. And if you don't hear anything right away, that's okay. The next day, you're going to sit and you're going to ask for help. Now, here's what's going to happen. You might not hear right away, but I guarantee if you pay attention throughout the day to the law of supply, you're going to see something show up that maybe you didn't expect. Maybe you think you didn't ask for. You're going to see help show up in ways, and you've got to pay attention to how it shows up.
Yeah. Be super receptive.
Be super receptive.
Yeah. That's good.
It's a great exercise. It becomes fun. It's sort of like, that whole like be open or seek miracles. Well, be open and seek the law of supply. See where it really is showing up in your life. Because again, when you pay attention to it, you get more of it. When you're paying attention to where the supply is supposedly getting cut off, that's you cutting it off. That's our mind that gets in the way.
Let's look at a few ways. I think it's helpful when you can see how these things show up, right? To back up for a quick second, one of the things that's helpful for me is when I hear a statement like, the law of his being is perpetual increase. Okay, so my mind might have a little trouble adopting that right at the start of like, okay, and I approach it from the sense that, okay, let's assume that this is true. It's like, what do they call it in science? Is that a hypothesis? It's like, okay, so here's our hypothesis is this statement. All right, so what's that like? And you start to play around it as if it were true. It's not, that's the healthy use of skepticism, is like, let's see what's really here.
As if.
The other side of that is like, okay, well, let's prove it all wrong.
Right.
Well, you can do that too.
That's heavy.
Well, yeah, it doesn't let you get to all the real gems.
Yeah.
Because you discount all the things that don't make sense, and your limited mind is inherently going to have a challenge looking at an unlimited universe and trying to put it in context.
Right.
So that brings me to that part of like, let's look at a few ways that nature is showing us this. You've got one tiny little acorn, and you plant that tiny little acorn in the earth, and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows into a huge oak tree, right? And then it lets off all the little helicopters. And then all the little helicopters go off and they make more oak trees. and it continues and continues and continues. Now, if you stretch that out over a long period of time, your mind might say, okay, well, there's all these oak trees. They're just going to take over the whole planet, right? But that's not what we're talking about here. Each one of those oak trees will have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes. Right.
And as ones die, other ones and decay, other ones will grow and flourish.
Right.
And it continues in a perpetual cycle.
Right.
Continually. And there's an infinite number of oak trees in any given acorn.
Love it.
Think about that. Any given acorn, inside that acorn is an infinite number.
Because it'll just keep going.
They'll just keep going.
Yeah. The law of supply. That's a good way to look at it.
So it's there, and nature is showing us that it's there. That
And
it's an
nature
abundant
never
world.
makes mistakes.
Right. Man makes mistakes.
Man makes
so what do
mistakes,
we do? Like,
humans
how do we
make- yeah.
violate that law? Okay, well, we cut down all the oak trees.
Yeah, for freaking A.
Right. So we go and cut down, and then we're like, well, where's all the oak trees? Well, you cut them down. Like, you're writing on all the oak trees right now, or whatever, you're sitting on, like all these things. We give and take out of proportion.
Yeah.
So what we take, we're not putting back properly.
And the reason many people take is they have a fear of not enough.
Right.
Really, this whole law of supply is the law of prosperity, because
Yes.
the reverse of it is the law of lack or poverty consciousness. There's not enough.
Right.
And when we have that not enough, it makes us overspend. It makes us eat too much. It makes us just do a lot of stuff because we're in hoarding mode and operating from anxiety and fear. Pivot that to the law of supply. Begin to focus on one area of your life where you're going to see more. You're going to ask for help. You're going to see more.
Yes. Yeah. And continue to
Fertilize it.
and fertilize
Right.
it. That's another part of it, right? If you put that acorn, like let's say you plant your little seed and you just plant it in some mediocre soil and it's not a lot of rain and the environment's not set up for that, well, it's going to die. Like it's never going. It needs to be fertilized. It needs to be
some
watered.
love.
Like you have to do. You have to make sure that it has. If the earth is not providing naturally all of the elements that it needs, then it might need a little helping hand.
Right.
And that's how we cultivate amazing things in our lives. And that's how we've innovated such amazing things. Like our freaking iPhone is so cool, like in Wi-Fi. Like,
Do you know Tesla came up with that? I was reading this last night. Tesla had the idea of the smartphone. It started with stocks and trading. And he had this idea of like, we would hold and we know he's a paralleler, like he was of the future, clearly. But he would hold this in his hand, and he either said to Edison or somebody, like, we'll be able to communicate the different stocks and the trades. Like, he was the one. And I always wondered, did Steve Jobs read about that, or did he just download it? Anyways, yeah. So thank you, Nicola.
but who would have thought? Okay, so you take this handy little
Well,
thing.
Tesla would have.
Okay, aside from Tesla, but what normal person would have thought? And at a certain point, it's people, if you were to tell people at that stage, I'm sure that they said, number one, that's crazy. And two, like, who would want that?
Well,
Who would even think about, like, why would that? People will hold on to the old ways. The same way with Edison with the light bulb.
Right.
Is that there was a period of adoption. Some people were like, that's amazing. Like, we need more of that. And other people were like, I'm good with my candles.
Right.
I got my candles and my oil. Like, we're
Well,
good.
it's like we talked about before. It's the certainty. It's what's familiar.
Right.
And it's what keeps us small.
But that's an example that he uses in this book as well. And he says, okay, well, as the demand for it increased,
Yes, so will the supply.
the supply increased.
Absolutely.
Right. And as human beings, like, that is our responsibility to create sustainability.
Right.
Not from a place of lack. Right. I think that's a really big piece where people get really stuck in lack and they're like, we're not going to have enough. We have to save the environment and everything like that. I'm fairly certain that the earth is going to be just fine without human beings.
Yeah, and probably better.
And we'll live our course here, and that's awesome. And then the earth is going to go on and do exactly what it's going to do, which has been doing for billions of years. So we're all good. But aside from that, right? So circling back, not from that lack place, but really from the smart place of working with the law that is like, okay, how can we set this up for true sustainability? And that is true in your own human being with
Absolutely.
your energy. So if you're running an energy deficit every day, if you're running yourself so hard and running everything out and you're not taking time to replenish yourself, well, you're going to that's going to hit your physical body. You're going to have some challenges.
Absolutely.
Right. But the law of supply is saying there's plenty. There's plenty for you. All you need to do is allow that and take the actions that are needed in order to set that up in a sustainable way.
Absolutely. Hands down. So I have something I want to share before we go. Can it be the last concept we leave people with, or is there something else you want to talk about?
I'm good.
So one of the things that I know I do, and so I'm assuming this is going to be maybe for others, is we might ask ourselves, how am I going to do this?
Oh.
How am I going to have the energy? How can I learn that? Like, it's always we go into how. And rather than the how am I? Like, we limit it to me. And then we want to move into my source, my fuel isn't me. When we tap into our source, our fuel is from universe, God, the laws. All of a sudden we understand we have way more energy. We have way more capability. We can solve any problem. It's when we stick with that little I instead of the I am and understand who we are in this universe. And that's what I want everyone. The law of supply just means you get to run and use source energy. So use it. Ask for it.
It's all energy and it's all there for you.
Right.
It really is just waiting. And I think that's such a great point that you bring up.
It's not just us. We have a supply.
Yeah.
We just often forget it's there.
Yeah. You think that it all has to come from you. That's funny. Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. That's actually a belief that's filtered its way into the healing community. And that's why so many healers wind up drained or really
tired.
Limited.
Yeah. Using their own energy.
Yeah.
No.
Limited in the amount.
Especially in healing.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing originated here, right? The concepts, the ideas, everything's in universal intelligence space. We have access to that.
Right. We're just trying to decode
exactly
what's there. So that's why it really pays to keep it really simple.
Exactly.
Because it's an infinitely complex universe. And if you dive only into the complexity, then you'll just get really, really confused. But when you look for the simplicity of the laws at play, like the law of supply, if you see it showing up in one place, you know that there's something really there to be explored.
Absolutely.
Infinite number of oak trees in an acorn. Infinite number of human beings inside of, a man and a woman, like to procreate, and then it keeps going and keeps going. Like, it's amazing, right? It's all right there.
Infinite supply that is not from ourselves.
Not from ourselves.
All right, everyone. Thank you for being here. Please share this episode with someone. Give us a rating, a review, and tune in because we are not done with working with the law. Much love.
Namaste.
Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.